did a $43 grocery bill ignite a family implosion threatening your career? I'm sitting here in my 2018 Honda Civic in the Costco parking lot at 3:17 a.m. trying to process the fact that my entire life might be about to detonate because of a $43.67 grocery bill. Seriously, that's the hill we died on. I just found out my mother, Alice Brown, 60F, is not just enabling my brother, she's actively risking my career and possibly my entire future. I don't even know where to start with this dumpster fire, TBH. For context, I'm Isaac Petrov, 52M. I'm a freelancer, mostly in graphic design and web stuff, which means I hustle constantly just to keep the lights on and pay the $1,247 rent on my apartment 3B. I am perpetually running on Starbucks and 4 hours of sleep. My mother, Alice, is the classic definition of a people pleaser. She means well, but she has absolutely zero spine, especially when it comes to her favorite, her golden child, my brother Edward Russell, 78M. Yes, Edward is 78, I'm 52. Our age gap is large, a whole other trauma narrative we don't have time for tonight. Edward is technically retired, but he acts like he's perpetually between jobs. He's the type of guy who talks constantly about his big project, but hasn't actually submitted an invoice for revenue since 2019. He lives in Mom's house in Westfield, a big rambling place she inherited, and he treats her like a combination personal assistant, banker, and maid. I've been trying to keep my distance, but my income relies heavily on a few very large, very high-stress government contracts. If those contracts go south, I'm basically living in the Civic. I've been clear with my family, I need absolute professionalism and discretion right now. I'm dealing with security clearances and background checks that are making my hair fall out. The complications started brewing 2 weeks ago. It was Edward's 78th birthday party. It wasn't a party, really. It was an obligation. We met at Olive Garden, because of course we did. It was 5:30 p.m. on a Saturday. Mom was buzzing around nervous, wearing a dress she bought at TJ Maxx specifically for the occasion, trying to make sure Edward was comfortable. Edward naturally was already complaining. Alice, these breadsticks aren't hot enough. Did you tell them it was my birthday? You didn't, did you? Edward, who was wearing a disgustingly stained polo shirt, said this with his whole chest. Mom Alice rushed to apologize to the poor waiter. Edward got the complimentary Ben & Jerry's sundae later, of course, because Mom insisted. I was sitting there trying to calculate if the chicken parm was worth the inevitable migraine. I checked my iPhone 14, I had 47 unanswered notifications. I had just finished dealing with a massive client-server crash that Tuesday at 11:47 a.m. and I hadn't slept properly since. I was exhausted and anxious. The immediate tension wasn't the food, it was the phone calls. I noticed Edward was glued to his Samsung Galaxy. Usually he ignores technology, but he kept glancing at it and muttering. He got up from the table no less than 6 times to take calls outside, whispering aggressively. What is that about? I asked Mom, trying to be casual while stuffing my face with fettuccine. Alice looked down at her lap, fiddling with the paper napkin. Oh, Isaac, don't worry about Edward. He's just dealing with some business, very important business. I know. Red flag waving the size of Texas. But Edward has always had business. It's his shield. Later that night, after we paid the $347 bill, Edward conveniently forgot his wallet, so Mom zelled me half, which I'm still waiting for. BTW, I went back to my place. I had a deadline looming and I needed to submit some critical documents to my biggest client. We'll call them the agency by Monday morning. The contracts are sensitive. They require documentation of every single person who has access to my proprietary servers, especially anyone working freelance or being paid through my business LLC. I have to list every contractor, every sub-vendor, every W-9 recipient. If there are any discrepancies, the agency can pull the contract, resulting in astronomical penalties. We're talking losing 6 figures instantly. It's scary stuff, and I've been meticulous. So here's where the toxic parent enabler theme kicks in hard. Last Thursday, I was reconciling my quarterly accounts. I use a secure system, obviously, but I had to go through bank statements to match my Zelle and PayPal transactions. I'm usually pretty tight, but I noticed something weird. 3 separate withdrawals from my business account over the last month, all marked Edward R. Services. The amounts weren't huge, but they were consistent. $200, $200, and $200, total of $600. I didn't authorize this. I literally have never worked with Edward, and I certainly wasn't paying him for services. Edward is incapable of logging into Netflix, let alone providing services that merit payment from my LLC. My stomach dropped. That familiar, cold, acid reflux-inducing dread. I immediately called Mom. It was 9 p.m. Mom, can you put Edward on the phone? I asked, trying to keep the panic out of my voice. Oh, Isaac, he's sleeping. Is everything all right? Alice's voice was instantly laced with defensive anxiety. No, everything is not all right. Why did my business account pay Edward $600? Silence, just the sound of the TV faintly playing in the background. Mom, she finally sighed, a long, weary sound that told me everything. He needed a little help, honey, just a loan. His business, you know, it's taking off slow. A loan? Mom, you're not listed on my business accounts. You do not have access to my money. How did this happen? Oh well, remember a few months ago when you had that big emergency and the plumber charged you $85 for the diagnostic and you needed to transfer money quickly? You showed me how to use the app on your iPad, my iPad, which I occasionally leave at her house, logged into the bank app because I am an idiot. Past me was an absolute clown for being so trusting. And you made those payments? I felt the blood draining from my face. No, not me, Alice insisted, sounding increasingly frail. Edward just needed the bank routing number and some access to verify something. It was just a little help, Isaac. He promised to pay it back. He really needs the money right now. The tax people are giving him trouble. Tax people, right? I didn't even yell. I was literally shaking, full body shaking. Mom, you don't understand the gravity of this. This isn't just $600. This is classified as a payment to a contractor through my LLC. I did not issue a W-9 for Edward. This is tax fraud. And worse, my client, the agency, explicitly requires me to list every single person I pay who has access to my proprietary info. If they find out I've been making unauthorized payments to a non-existent contractor, they will not only drop the contract, they could flag me for security violations. I will never work in this field again. They will revoke my clearances. The sheer stupidity of the move, combined with the fact that Edward was the one manipulating Alice, made me see red. The rage I felt was volcanic. It was just $600, Isaac. Please don't make a fuss. It's Edward's birthday week. He's very stressed, Alice pleaded. That was her signature move, minimize my actual life-altering issue to protect Edward's temporary feelings. Mom, you have put my livelihood in jeopardy to fund Edward's delusion, I said, my voice dangerously low. Did you talk to Edward about this? Did he explicitly tell you to do this? He just needed the numbers, Isaac. He said he would explain everything to you later. He was going to put you on retainer for some consulting work. He was doing you a favor. I hung up. I couldn't breathe. I walked straight to my kitchen and threw up. I spent the weekend drafting the email to Edward demanding he repay the $600 immediately and insisting he cease and desist using my bank information. He responded Monday morning at 6:05 a.m. with a single-line text, "You're overreacting, call me later." Yes, he used the wrong "you're," the disrespect. I emailed him back, "I am not calling you. Repay the $600 by the end of the day or I file a police report for theft." He went silent. I called my contact at the agency, Janet, who is usually very understanding. I told her I found a discrepancy in my Q2 expenses related to a minor administrative oversight and I needed to verify procedures for reporting unauthorized internal transactions. I was vague, but I needed to gauge the actual threat level. Janet's response was brutal. Isaac, if any unauthorized individual, especially a relative, is found using your corporate credentials or receiving payments, we not only terminate the contract, but we are legally obligated to review all past clearances. This is a severe breach of protocol. You need to fix this now. Document everything. That's when I realized the rabbit hole was deeper. I had to assume the worst. I changed all my passwords, put two-factor authentication on every single account, and secured my iPad with the biometric scan. But the documentation part stuck with me. If I had to prove this was unauthorized theft and not tax fraud on my part, I needed undeniable evidence that Edward and Alice were colluding or that Edward was manipulating Alice. I drove to Mom's house yesterday afternoon. Edward was out on a call. I sat Alice down at the kitchen table. It was pouring rain outside, matching my mood. Mom, I need you to tell me exactly how Edward got that money. I need the truth and I need you to document it for me. I need you to write a statement saying you did this under Edward's instruction and without my explicit permission, as he claimed it was an emergency. Alice's eyes welled up immediately. Isaac, you're going to get Edward in trouble. He's sensitive. I am already in trouble, Mom. Edward put my entire career on the line for $600. I am asking you to save me, please. She finally broke down and told me it was worse than I thought. Edward didn't just ask for the routing number. He asked Alice to submit a fake invoice through my own payment portal, which I had stupidly given her limited access to so she could help me track my grocery receipts for taxes. The actual $43.67 grocery bill was one of the few legitimate things she tracked. He had drafted the invoice himself, labeling it R&D consultation. But he said he was going to start working with you, Isaac. He said you were too busy to do the paperwork. He promised. He even showed me some drafts of his ideas, Alice sobbed, pulling a crumpled piece of paper out of her apron pocket. It was a sketch of a website redesign. It looked like it was designed in 1998. I felt sick. This wasn't just desperation, it was deliberate manipulation. Mom, did Edward happen to mention anything about me having to sign some new paperwork for the agency? I asked, my heart hammering against my ribs. Alice nodded quickly, still crying. Oh yes, he said that you had so much paperwork and you were stressed and he was helping you simplify it. He said he took care of it. Took care of what, Mom? The authorization form for the clearances. He said it was just so that I could answer any questions if you were unavailable. He was trying to help. My blood went cold. The agency requires updated authorization for background checks every quarter, often including signing waivers that confirm all household members or dependents are noted and that the person signing is the sole person in control of the business finances. Mom, where is that form? What did you sign? Oh, it was a long one, Isaac. Edward helped me fill it out. I didn't read it all, but he said it was fine, that it would help you pass the security audit faster. I jumped up. Where did he put it? Where is the copy? We tore the kitchen apart. Under a pile of Costco receipts, I found it. A thick stack of documents photocopied at a Kinko's. I recognized the paper stock. It was the full comprehensive security clearance reapplication package. Everything was there: proprietary information disclosures, server security protocols, and the final authorizations. But Edward hadn't just helped Alice fill it out. The signature line for the applicant, me, Isaac Petrov, was clearly forged. And under the section where it asks if any financial or managerial authority has been delegated to another party, Edward had checked yes. And under the designated authority section, written clearly in Edward's cramped, looping handwriting, was the name, Edward Russell, 78M. My hands started shaking so violently I dropped the papers. Why would he do this? I whispered, looking at Alice, who looked terrified. He said you were working too hard, Isaac. He said he needed to step up and help manage the business. He said he was going to be your managing partner. Managing partner? Mom, he has effectively just told the agency that I am incompetent, that I require a 78-year-old amateur with a history of financial trouble to manage my security protocols, and that he has access to all my proprietary information. This is not assistance, Mom. This is career suicide for me. But the worst part, the absolute worst part, was the final signature line on the supplemental form, the one that requires confirmation of familial ties and addresses. Edward had listed himself as my dependent, which is insane. He's 78 and lives in Mom's house, not mine. And then I saw the very last line, the section Alice said he told her to sign to verify his help. It wasn't a verification of help. It was a legal declaration, notarized by some sketchy dude named Gary on a mobile notary stamp. The whole thing looks like it was done at a Starbucks parking lot, stating that due to Isaac Petrov's recent erratic behavior and failure to manage corporate assets, Edward Russell is taking temporary custodial responsibility for Isaac Petrov's minor child, Maya, until the security audit is complete. I don't have a minor child. I have a 17-year-old daughter, Maya, who lives with her mother 3 states away. She turns 18 next month. Edward didn't sign paperwork to help me with my business. Edward signed paperwork alleging I was mentally unstable and trying to get temporary parental rights over my almost adult daughter to use her college fund money. I grabbed the papers and ran. I didn't even say goodbye to Alice. I just got in my Civic and started driving, not stopping until I got to the Costco parking lot because I knew they had free Wi-Fi and I could immediately scan and send everything to my lawyer. I've been on the phone with my lawyer for the last hour. My lawyer confirmed that while Edward's claim is absolute nonsense and he has zero legal standing, the mere submission of a document like this to a federal contractor is so deeply disturbing and potentially fraudulent that it puts my entire security clearance, and thus my entire livelihood, in immediate jeopardy. Edward has made a move that suggests I am unfit to run my business and unfit to parent. My lawyer said we have to preemptively file restraining orders and legal declarations immediately. He told me to document everything Edward and Alice have done in the last 48 hours. So here I am, Isaac, 52M, sitting in my Civic, eating Talenti gelato straight from the container, typing this out like a manifesto. My mother, Alice, 60F, an alleged people-pleaser, enabled my golden child brother, Edward, 78M, who is currently trying to use my federal contract to fraudulently gain control over my daughter's future college savings, all because she couldn't stand up to him and he needed $600 in some imaginary managing partner status. I just texted Alice, "You need to call me immediately. If you talk to Edward before you talk to me, I am done. You chose him. I will document every detail. This is now a legal matter." Her phone started ringing exactly 27 times in the next hour. I know because I saw the notifications stack up on my Apple Watch. All of them were from Edward. I didn't answer. I am currently transferring the scanned documents to my lawyer. He's telling me the first step is to file an emergency injunction to stop Edward from using my name or mentioning my daughter again. But the worst part, I'm absolutely terrified that Edward has already submitted that managing partner and custody paperwork to the agency. If he has, my contract is dead and my life is officially over. I'm literally refreshing my client's portal every 5 seconds, waiting for the email that says my contract has been terminated pending investigation. I need to know what Edward did next, but I can't call Alice because I know she'll just say, "He's stressed, Isaac, be nice." I am done, just done. I'm waiting for my lawyer to call me back with the injunction details, and I'm trying not to scream. I'm thinking about the birthday party, the lukewarm breadsticks, the $347 bill, and realizing that everything was a distraction from the sheer malicious plot Edward was running in the background. And now I have to figure out how to document that my toxic mother helped my toxic brother try to commit professional suicide on my behalf and steal my daughter's future. I need advice. Tell me I'm not crazy. Tell me what I do about Alice. I am dying. My phone is ringing. It's the agency. I have to take this. Wish me luck. Ill update when I survive. I picked up the call. It was Janet. My stomach felt like I'd swallowed a granite brick. I had the Civic heater blasting, but I was sweating. "Isaac, thank God you answered," Janet said, and her voice was tight. Not angry, which was good, but tense, which was much, much worse. "Janet, I literally just finished emailing my lawyer the documentation. I am preemptively reporting a severe fraudulent attempt on my corporate credentials by a family member. I need to know if any new paperwork has been submitted to your office in the last 48 hours referencing me or my LLC." There was a pause that lasted approximately 300 years. "Isaac, I can't discuss specific security filings with you right now, as you know. But I can tell you that security flagged a file submitted late yesterday afternoon. It wasn't routed through the proper channels. It was hand-delivered to the front desk by an individual claiming to be your managing partner and seeking immediate validation for a change of managerial oversight due to your alleged stress-induced incapacitation. Oh my God, he did it. Edward actually marched down there. He drove an hour and a half to try and pull this off in person. The sheer audacity. I closed my eyes and fought the urge to vomit again. Was the individual Edward Russell, 78, wearing a stained polo shirt? Janet sighed. "Isaac, listen to me. Security didn't accept the documents formally, but they are obligated to flag them. They contain sensitive proprietary information and, more critically, claims that could jeopardize your current clearance, specifically the allegations regarding custodial issues. He has zero legal standing for the custodial claim. Zero. My daughter is 17 and lives 3 states away with her mother. He literally pulled that out of his ass to leverage her college fund. It is 100% baseless fraud. I believe you, Isaac, but the internal system doesn't run on belief, it runs on documentation. The forms contained a forged signature and an official-looking, though clearly fraudulent, notary stamp. Right now, this has triggered an immediate internal review. Your contracts are temporarily suspended, effective immediately, pending the outcome of the fraud investigation. Suspended, I heard the word, but it didn't register at first. It was like watching a car crash in slow motion. Suspended means no access to the proprietary files, no submitting invoices, no revenue flow, and worst of all, an open federal investigation into my personal and business conduct. Janet, what can I do right now? My voice was just a dry rasp. Your lawyer needs to contact security immediately today with those injunction documents. You need to provide sworn testimony that Edward Russell has committed identity theft and fraud, and you need to provide evidence that you have formally severed all ties, financial and personal, with Edward and Alice effective immediately. If you can prove they were acting criminally and without your authorization, and that you are taking immediate, aggressive legal action against them, we might be able to limit the damage. But Isaac, this is bad, really bad. She hung up shortly after, citing protocol. I sat there in the Civic for another hour not moving. The gelato melted all over my passenger seat. I didn't care. My lawyer, bless his perpetually stressed soul, called back at 5:15 a.m. His name is Ben. He sounds like he drinks 3 pots of coffee before noon. Isaac, we have the emergency injunction draft ready. We are filing this morning. We are going to name Edward Russell and Alice Brown. You need to formally attest that Alice provided him with credentials, making her a party to the fraud whether she intended it or not. We have to show the agency zero tolerance on your end. Name my mother. I felt a sharp pang of pain mixed with relief. Yes, Isaac, you asked me to protect your career and your daughter. To do that, we have to burn this bridge entirely. We need sworn testimony from you detailing the extent of Alice's enablement and how she provided unauthorized access to your business portal, regardless of her motives. This establishes that she was the weak link Edward exploited, not you being negligent. I agreed. I had to. I literally had no choice. She chose Edward over my entire future. I had to choose my future over her feelings. Update Tuesday, 9:30 a.m. The documentation begins. I went home, showered, and then went straight into full-blown crisis mode. No sleep, just pure cold adrenaline. Ben, my lawyer, was already sending the preliminary papers for me to sign electronically. The first thing I did was send the final text to Alice, the one I drafted in the parking lot. You need to call me immediately. If you talk to Edward before you talk to me, I am done. You chose him. I will document every detail. This is now a legal matter. Edward had called her 27 times that night, remember? She hadn't called me back. I knew she was already trying to minimize the situation to Edward. I called Maya's mom, Sarah. This was the absolute hardest part. Sarah and I have a decent co-parenting relationship now, but it was rocky for years. She has final say on Maya's finances and education, and thank God for that. Maya's college fund is a separate trust fund, totally protected, which made Edward's move even stupider but still terrifying. I told Sarah everything flatly, professionally, and fast. I scanned and sent her the fraudulent notarized document Edward submitted. She was silent on the phone for a full minute after I finished. I could hear the sheer cold rage building up. Isaac, if that man had laid one finger on Maya's paperwork, or if he had shown up at her school, I would have had him institutionalized, Sarah said, her voice dangerously quiet. I am calling the lawyer immediately. We are joining your injunction and adding a specific PPO, personal protection order, covering Maya. Edward Russell is to have zero contact with her ever. This is non-negotiable. Sarah's participation was critical. It showed the agency that this was not just a business dispute. This was an active external threat to my family that I was aggressively combating. I felt a tiny fraction lighter. Maya was safe financially and legally. 2 days later, the confrontation with Alice, the documentation part 2, I needed Alice's sworn statement about the unauthorized access. Ben was clear. If she refused to cooperate, it would look like I was covering for her negligence, and the agency would view me as equally complicit. I drove back to Westfield. I didn't call ahead. I arrived at 11:00 a.m. on Wednesday. Edward's beat-up Ford Escort wasn't in the driveway, which was a small mercy. Alice opened the door looking like she hadn't slept in a week. She was wearing that same TJ Maxx dress, weirdly the one from the Olive Garden birthday party. Isaac, oh honey, thank God. Edward told me you were making things difficult. He said it was just a misunderstanding with the bank and he's going to pay you back the $600 next week. He just needs to. I cut her off. I had rehearsed this in the car until my throat was raw. I walked past her into the kitchen. I wasn't shaking anymore. I was frozen. Mom, stop. You need to look at me. Edward is facing serious legal action for identity theft, corporate fraud, and attempted interference with parental rights. He did not file a misunderstanding. He forged my signature on documents submitted to a federal client claiming I was mentally unstable and he was taking over my business and my daughter's guardianship. Alice actually clutched her chest. Oh, Isaac, no, he wouldn't. He's just trying to help. He said you were so stressed. He just wanted to be your partner. You're overreacting, Isaac, just like he said you would. That was it. The phrase, you're overreacting. The ultimate people pleaser minimization tactic. I am suspended from my job, Mom. My 6-figure contract is on ice. If I can't prove this was an unauthorized criminal act perpetuated by Edward using your access, I lose everything. Do you understand? The house of cards collapses. I pulled out the statement Ben had drafted. It was short, clear, and damning. It stated that Alice Brown, under duress and manipulation by Edward Russell, provided bank and system access to Edward, who then used that access without Isaac Petrov's knowledge or consent to submit fraudulent invoices and documents. Mom, you need to sign this. You need to write, I agree this statement is true, and sign and date it. If you sign this, you are confirming your role was manipulated and you are cooperating with law enforcement. If you refuse, I have to tell my lawyer that you are actively protecting a known fraudster, which makes you complicit. Which means you are named in the fraud investigation alongside Edward. She stared at the paper like it was written in alien hieroglyphics. Tears started streaming down her face again. I can't do that, Isaac. He's my son. He's sensitive. He will be devastated. He's 78. He can't handle this stress. He's 78 and tried to steal my business and my daughter's future college savings, Mom. He is a predator and you are his shield. You are enabling criminal behavior. You have been enabling him for 52 years, but this time it is costing me my life. I am done covering for him and I need you to stop covering for him. Now, I sat the pen on the table. This is it, Alice, this is the choice. Me, your son who supports himself and has never asked you for a dime, or Edward, the golden child who literally tries to steal from me. If you don't sign this, I will never speak to you again. I will change my name. I will move to a new state. I will tell Maya exactly what you did and she will never talk to you again. You lose us both forever. It was brutal. I hated myself for saying it, but I needed to use the one leverage I had left, the threat of complete permanent separation. She started rocking back and forth, sobbing uncontrollably. He's my boy, he just needs help. Why can't you two just get along? We can't get along because he tried to legally declare me incompetent to take my money. That's not a squabble over lukewarm breadsticks, Mom. That's criminal fraud. She finally stopped rocking. She looked at the paper. Her hand shook violently as she picked up the pen. She didn't sign it right away. She looked at me, her eyes red and full of a pain that was entirely her own creation. If I sign this, Edward will hate me, she whispered. If you don't sign this, I will hate you, I replied, equally low. She signed it. Her signature was shaky and messy, but it was there. She wrote, I agree this statement is true. Alice Brown, 11/15/20XX. I immediately took a high-resolution photo of the document and emailed it to Ben. Thank you, Mom. Now, where is Edward? He went to Gary's house. Notary? He went to get a counter affidavit notarized. He said you were threatening him. Of course he did. Edward was already trying to counterfall. I grabbed the papers. Don't call Edward. Don't warn him. I'm giving this to the lawyer. You need to stay here. If you warn him, I'm sending a copy of this statement straight to the agency with a note saying you recanted and are still enabling him. I left. I drove away from that house feeling both victorious and like it just ripped out my own heart. I finally had the evidence, but the cost was astronomical. Quick update. Wednesday afternoon, 4:00 p.m. Ben was ecstatic about Alice's statement. It was exactly what he needed to show the agency that the fraud was external and actively being pursued. He filed the emergency injunction against Edward Russell and filed the protective order for Maya, naming Edward and specifically listing the attempted fraudulent custodial transfer as the basis. I changed all my business banking, canceled all my corporate credit cards, and most importantly, I locked down my LLC with new security protocols that even I can barely access. I was riding on fumes, but I felt marginally safer. Then Edward called. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail. I played it for Ben and then transcribed it for documentation. It was classic Edward. Isaac, you are behaving like a spoiled toddler. I am trying to help you. Alice is distraught. You went over there and bullied her. You have created an unnecessary drama for $600. I am currently consulting with my own legal counsel regarding your threats. I suggest you withdraw these ridiculous injunctions immediately before I take further steps to secure managerial oversight of your unstable business. And that matter regarding Maya is a sensitive family matter that should not be exposed to outsiders. Call me back. I forwarded the transcription to Ben with one word, LMAO. Edward thinks he can still bluff his way out of a federal fraud investigation. He is 78 years old and still living in fantasy land. Fast forward to Friday, the blow-up. I hadn't slept properly. I was living on Celsius and stale Costco muffins. My anxiety was through the roof because the contract was still suspended and I had no income flowing in. I was supposed to meet my friend Mark for dinner to finally talk everything out, but I needed one more thing before I could breathe, the $600. It wasn't about the money anymore, it was about the legal requirement. I needed Edward to repay the fraudulent payment so I could show the agency that the transaction was fully reversed and rectified. I texted Edward very formally, repay the $600 by 5 p.m. today or I am filing the police report for theft, which will be submitted directly to the fraud investigators already reviewing your submitted documents. Silence. At 4:45 p.m. I got a notification. Edward zelled me $600. Victory, a tiny one, but I took it. At 5:02 p.m. my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered cautiously. Hello, Isaac, it's Alice. She sounded totally different. Cold. Firm. Mom, I told you you needed to limit contact right now. Everything has to go through my lawyer. I'm not calling to apologize this time, Isaac. I'm calling to tell you that you're cruel. You made your brother cry. He is 78. He has heart troubles. You have traumatized him. And you have absolutely no right to speak to me that way, threatening to cut me out of your life. That is not how family behaves. I was stunned. I thought signing the affidavit was the end of the enablement. I thought she finally saw the light. I was so wrong. She didn't sign it out of conviction. She signed it out of fear of losing me. The moment Edward cried, she reverted to type. Mom, he filed fraudulent paperwork claiming I was mentally unfit. He tried to steal my daughter's money. How can you stand there and defend him? He said you owed him. He said he worked hard on those consulting designs. You refused to pay him a living wage for years, and now he had to take matters into his own hands. He said you were getting too big for your britches and needed to be brought down a notch, and he was just trying to help you manage your stress by taking over the business. The managing partner delusion was apparently fully solidified in their reality. He's a 78-year-old unemployed man living in your house who hasn't worked in a decade, and he is trying to commit fraud. He is not my business manager, and he is definitely not my parent. I am 52. Stop infantilizing him. You are just angry because Edward found out you've been hoarding proprietary designs. He said he was going to expose you to the agency if you didn't agree to the partnership. He said you were hiding things from the IRS. I dropped the phone. The sheer fabrication was insane. Edward wasn't just manipulating her, he was creating a counter-narrative of my supposed criminality to justify his actions. He was trying to frame me as a tax evader who needed managerial supervision. I picked up the phone. I was shaking with the clarity of it. Alice, you just gave me evidence. Did Edward tell you I was hoarding designs and hiding things from the IRS? Well, yes, he said that's why you were so worried about the audit. He said he was saving you from jail. I am documenting this conversation. Every single lie Edward told you to justify his criminal behavior you have just provided as sworn testimony to me. This will all be submitted as evidence of fraud and slander against Edward Russell. If he had actual evidence of fraud, he wouldn't have to forge signatures and try to steal custody of my daughter. You need to face the truth. You are defending a criminal who is actively trying to destroy your other son's life. I don't believe you, she shrieked. I just want my two boys to be happy. You are the one driving a wedge between us. No, Mom, Edward drove the wedge when he committed fraud. You cemented the wedge when you defended him. This is the last time we will speak until I receive a letter from your lawyer stating you are prepared to cooperate fully with my counsel in the federal investigation. I hung up. I immediately contacted Ben and summarized the call. Ben's response was great. Excellent. Edward is panicking and shifting the blame. He's doubling down on the managerial supervision narrative, which further proves he intended to take over your company. This is solid evidence for the PPO and the fraud claim. A week went by where I literally just existed. I couldn't focus on anything. The contract was suspended, which meant I wasn't allowed to work on the files, but I still had to answer technical questions for my backup team. The fear of termination was constant. My life was a carousel of legal filings, background checks, and anxiety attacks. I had 3 therapy sessions in that week alone. My therapist, Dr. Chen, told me I was grieving the loss of the mother I always wished I had, not the one I actually had. That realization hurt. I had to tell Edward to stay away from me, my house, and my daughter. Ben filed the legal notice. Edward responded by sending me a text from an unfamiliar number because I blocked his main one. The text read, I saw you at Trader Joe's this morning. You look thin, maybe you should eat something. Alice is worried about you. I literally saw him at Trader Joe's and hid behind the organic dairy display. He was stalking me. He was still trying to exert control. The sheer creepy entitlement of it. I sent the screenshot to Ben, who immediately had the police contact Edward regarding violation of the intent of the injunction even before it was formally served. The confrontation I was dreading finally happened that Saturday. I had to go back to Alice's house one last time to retrieve a box of extremely important personal documents that I had stored in her attic for years old: tax records, my daughter's immunization history, etc. I waited until I knew Edward was at his weekly poker game. I brought Mark, my best friend, for muscle and as a neutral witness. Mark waited in the Civic while I went inside. Alice opened the door. Her face was puffy, but her expression was hard. What do you want, Isaac? I need my documents from the attic, and I need to collect the security key to my LLC server room that Edward somehow acquired. Edward is gone. You ran him off, Alice cried, the performance starting instantly. I know Edward is at poker. I just need the key in the box. We went up to the attic. The silence was thick and awful. She finally pointed to a dusty banker's box labeled, Isaac, do not touch. I opened the box. Everything seemed to be there. I felt a surge of relief. But then I saw a manila envelope tucked inside, clearly not mine. It was sealed. What is this, Mom? Alice went totally pale. I don't know. Edward told me to put some important business documents in a safe place. He said you were getting too messy. I ripped the envelope open. Inside were 2 items. First, a photocopy of a cashier's check for $4,500, written out to Edward Russell from a sketchy-sounding consulting firm LLC that I had never heard of. The memo line read, payment for proprietary client acquisition data transfer. Second, a printed screenshot of a confidential email exchange between me and Janet from the agency discussing server architecture. It was marked internal, do not distribute. I felt like the floor was tilting. Edward hadn't just claimed he was taking over my business. He was actively trying to sell my proprietary client data. That $4,500 check wasn't for R&D, it was a payoff for corporate espionage. And the only way he got that confidential email was if he was accessing my private client-side email portal. Mom, how did he get access to my secure client email? I asked, my voice dangerously calm. Alice burst into tears again, but this time the tears weren't defensive, they were terrified. He said he needed to check if you were getting secret mail. He said you were being targeted by a Nigerian prince scam and he was helping you filter the bad emails. I just gave him the password. He made me promise not to tell you. He said if you found out, the Nigerian prince would get all your money. I stared at her. She seriously fell for that, a Nigerian prince. Edward didn't just enable himself. He had weaponized Alice's gullibility to commit serious corporate crime. He had convinced her he was saving me from fictional scammers while simultaneously trying to sell my IP. I put the box down. I looked at the check, the data transfer. This was hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of damage, not just $600. I walked back down the stairs, leaving Alice standing next to the banker's box in the attic. I am taking this box and I am taking this evidence, I said, finding Alice back in the kitchen. I am submitting the evidence of corporate espionage to the FBI, Mom. Edward is not just facing civil fraud, he's facing federal charges now, and you facilitated it. You are literally the key master for your golden child's felony. You are going to put your brother in jail, Isaac, she whispered, horrified. He is putting himself in jail, Mom. I am just documenting the facts. You need to call Ben, my lawyer, and tell him everything you know about this consulting firm and the Nigerian prince scam. Right now, your only chance of avoiding prosecution for complicity is full cooperation. I drove away, leaving her standing there, still in shock. Mark, sensing the catastrophic energy in the car, didn't ask questions until we were 20 miles away. Dude, you look like you saw a ghost. What happened? Mark asked. I just handed him the check and the printout. Mark looked at the evidence, looked at me, and then slammed his hand on the dashboard. Oh, Edward is done. This isn't a family issue anymore, Isaac. This is the feds. By Tuesday, I was totally exhausted. The logistics are killing me. Ben confirmed that with the corporate espionage evidence, the landscape changes entirely. The agency is now viewing me as a victim of a targeted internal threat, not a co-conspirator. The suspension is still in place, but they are assisting with the investigation, which means I might survive professionally. Edward, however, received the formal injunction and the PPO. He responded exactly how a toxic person responds when their leverage is removed. He tried to communicate through third parties. My poor daughter Maya, who is usually texting about TikToks and college applications, got a weird, cryptic direct message on Instagram from a burner account. It read, "You need to tell your father that he is ruining the family. I need access to my inheritance to help Alice, who is very sick now. If your father doesn't respond, tell him the truth about his mother's illness will come out." I immediately reported the account and filed the screenshot with the PPO violation claim. Edward was trying to terrorize a minor. He had crossed every line. I called Alice and used the burner phone I bought just for communicating with her and Edward. "Mom, Edward just violated the PPO by contacting Maya through Instagram, threatening her and lying about your health. Are you ill?" "Oh, Isaac, no, I am fine. My blood pressure is a little high, but I am fine. Edward just says things when he's stressed. He wants me to come stay with him, but he's staying at Gary's house and Gary's house smells like stale cigarettes, so I said no." Gary the notary, of course. "Mom, Edward is telling people you're sick so he can gain control of your assets, just like he tried to do with mine and Maya's. He has completely lost control. He needs my money, Isaac. He needs a place to live. You can't put your own brother on the streets," Alice wailed. I realized this was the core of the enablement. Alice did not see Edward as a criminal. She saw him as an eternal, helpless baby who needed her infinite financial and emotional resources, regardless of the cost to others. "Mom, Edward is not homeless. He is in self-imposed exile because he is fleeing the consequences of his actions. I am done. I cannot be around you or him. I am putting a pause on all personal contact. If you need me, you call Ben. He will relay messages. I will not engage with the drama." I hung up, blocked her on the burner phone, and smashed the phone with a hammer. Maybe that was a little dramatic, but it felt amazing. 3 days after that, the shocking alliance, I had lunch with Sarah, my ex-wife Maya's mom. This was the first time we'd met face-to-face to discuss the fiasco. "Isaac, I am still furious that your family allowed this level of toxicity to fester, but I want you to know I have your back entirely," Sarah said, sliding a folder across the table. "What is this?" "It's a declaration signed by me and Maya confirming that Edward Russell's claims of dependency or management authority are fraudulent and baseless. It also confirms that Maya, who is almost 18, is fully aware of his actions and supports the PPO. You need to submit this to security. It proves the familial threat is contained and reported." I almost cried. Sarah was being amazing. This support was the only thing keeping me afloat. "Thank you, Sarah. You saved me. You saved yourself, Isaac, by finally setting the boundary. But there's something else." She looked nervous. "Edward reached out to me 2 days ago before the PPO was served, thinking I would take his side against you." I braced myself. "What did he say?" "He told me that you were getting sloppy, that you were drinking too much, and that you were sleeping with Janet at the agency to keep your contract, which is why he had to step in to clean up the business ethics." I gaped. The lies were compounding, and you believed him? Sarah laughed, a genuine, hard laugh. "Isaac, I know you. You are perpetually stressed, yes, but you don't drink. You certainly don't have the energy to cheat on anyone, let alone an employee who could cost you your job. I told Edward that if he ever contacted me again, I would personally fly down and read him the PPO while he was being served." She paused. "But what was interesting is what he said about Alice." "What about Mom?" "He said he had to put the fear of God into Alice so she would help him get the bank information. He said he told her he was facing immediate arrest for tax evasion and that the only way to save himself was to transfer the $600 to show good faith payments to an LLC and that he would have to spend the night in jail if she didn't help immediately." This was worse than I thought. Edward wasn't just manipulating her, he was creating traumatic emotional emergencies to force her compliance. He fabricated a potential arrest. That level of psychological abuse finally put Alice's actions into perspective. She wasn't actively malicious, she was actively terrified and groomed. "I'm going to include that in the legal filings," I said, feeling a new cold determination. 2 weeks later, resolution in reality, the legal process is glacially slow and ridiculously expensive. My retainer alone was $15K, goodbye savings. But the documentation worked. The agency, thanks to Ben's aggressive legal filings and the mounting evidence of Edward's criminal activity, the corporate espionage check was the final nail, formally reinstated my contract. They determined I was a victim of familial identity theft and corporate sabotage, not a negligent employee. Victory, I get to keep my job, I get to keep my clearances, I get to pay my $1,247 rent. Edward, however, is now facing multiple legal battles. Ben filed the civil fraud suit, and because of the corporate espionage element, the FBI is now reportedly involved. Edward is supposedly living at Gary the notary's house, refusing to answer calls from anyone except his own lawyer, who is probably advising him to shut up. And Alice, this is the messy part. Alice is completely isolated now. Edward is furious at her for signing the statement, which he found out about through the court filings, and has completely cut her off. She calls me sometimes, crying, asking me to tell Edward she loves him. I don't answer. I have stuck to my boundary. All communication goes through Ben. Ben recently advised her that her only chance of moving forward without being named in the civil suit is to sign over her house to a revocable trust and formally declare Edward financially independent, thereby cutting off his access to her equity. She did it. She finally did something proactive to protect herself. But our relationship is over, at least for now. I haven't seen her in 5 weeks. She sends me sad Facebook messages about gardening and sends Mark screenshots of them asking if I'm okay. Mark relays them to me. "She's trying to hoover you back in, Isaac. Don't fall for the guilt trip." "I won't, I can't." Final reflection, 4 weeks post-Costco breakdown. I'm typing this from my apartment 3B, which is still too small, but at least it feels like a fortress now. I've installed a Ring camera and I change the key codes weekly. Paranoia is my new normal TBH. I finally managed to reconcile my Q2 expenses. The $600 is accounted for, the fraudulent invoice is voided, and the books are clean. That was the stupidest, most expensive $600 loan in history. Edward is a ghost. I hear rumors he tried to pawn his old baseball card collection to pay for legal fees. He's screwed and he deserves it. It sucks that my mother had to lose everything, her golden child, her peace of mind, to finally gain the smallest semblance of a spine, but that's the reality of dealing with toxic enablement. She created a monster and the monster eventually ate her too. I still have bad days. Yesterday I drove past an Olive Garden and felt a physical wave of nausea. The memory of that birthday party, the greasy table, the nervous smile of my mother, Edward complaining about the breadsticks, it all comes back. The whole thing was a performance covering up a high-stakes crime. The biggest lesson? Boundaries aren't just for defense, they're for survival. I literally almost lost my career and my relationship with my daughter because I was too tired and too trusting to realize that my mother was a security threat and my brother was a corporate predator. I'm not proud of how I handled some of this. I used threats, I leveraged my mother's fear, and I had to be cold and clinical when all I wanted to do was scream and break things. But it worked. My priority was me, my business, and Maya. And that priority kept me sane. I am seeing Maya next month for her 18th birthday. We're going to look at colleges and we're going to talk about boundaries. I'm going to tell her the full story, not to scare her, but to empower her to spot the red flags that I at 52 should have seen years ago. The trauma narrative is still being written, but the ending isn't termination, it's separation. And honestly, separation feels like a new beginning. Yesterday, I bought a new container of Talenti gelato. This time, I ate it in a bowl with a proper spoon on my couch, feeling absolutely nothing but relief. I guess that's progress. We'll update if Edward tries anything else insane, but for now, I am just trying to get back to design work and rebuild my emergency fund. Wish me luck. And seriously, document everything. You never know when your $43.67 grocery receipt portal is going to be used to commit federal fraud. Be safe out there, guys. I am out.